Wang Yibo never talks much about the moments that shaped him. People see the performances, the fame, the talent, the speed, the precision, but not the quiet fights he has with himself. And this story begins not with a stage or a spotlight, but with a room so silent he could hear his own heartbeat. It was a training room, the kind he grew up in, where the walls smelled like hard work and old sweat, where the lights buzzed slightly, where the mirrors could either be your best teacher or your sharpest critic. And on that particular night, Wang Yibo stood alone in front of those mirrors, trying to do something he had never done before. He wanted to reinvent himself. Not for the cameras. Not for the company. Not for fans. For himself. Because there comes a moment in every artist's life when staying the same becomes more painful than the risk of changing. And for Yibo, that moment arrived quietly, after a long day when he thought he had nothing left. He stared at his reflection. His shirt was soaked. His hair stuck to his forehead. He had already practiced the same dance combination more times than he could count. And still, something wasn't working. Something felt wrong. Something inside him felt trapped. He replayed the music again. Started from the top. Push, turn, slide, spin, stop. Again. 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 He wasn't chasing perfection. He was chasing the version of himself he knew existed, but had never fully seen. The room was warm, the air heavy, his body exhausted, but his mind was on fire. Each step he repeated felt like chipping away at the shell around him. He wasn't performing. He wasn't impressing anyone. He was fighting to break through the limit he didn't even know he had placed on himself. Hours passed. The sky outside turned from blue to purple, then black. Most people had gone home, but Yibo didn't. He couldn't. His heart wouldn't let him. And that's when it happened. Not the result he expected. Not the breakthrough he imagined. But something real. He stopped dancing. He walked over to the wall. And for the first time in a long time, he let himself sit down. He leaned his head back and closed his eyes. And he allowed himself to feel something he usually buried. Frustration. He wasn't angry at the dance. He wasn't angry at the industry. He wasn't angry at the world. He was angry at himself. Because deep inside, he knew he had been holding back. Not intentionally. Not out of fear. But because he had never allowed himself to push past a certain emotional boundary. He was skilled, disciplined, precise, but he had been too controlled. Too careful. Too self-contained. People admired him for it. But that same restraint had become a wall. He opened his eyes and stared at the ceiling. For a moment, he wondered if this was what reaching a limit felt like. Then a thought hit him. A simple one, but strong enough to change everything. What if the limit isn't real? He stood up, breathed in deeply, walked back to the center of the room, pressed play. But this time, he didn't dance like Wang Yibo the idol. He danced like Wang Yibo the human being. He let his anger out, his hopes out, his confusion, his ambition, his passion, all of it. He didn't count beats. He didn't correct mistakes. He didn't care about the mirrors. He danced the truth. And the truth was raw, powerful, imperfect, emotional. It was the kind of dance that didn't need an audience to matter. When he finished, his chest burned. His legs shook. Sweat ran down his face. But he felt lighter than he had in months, maybe years. He wasn't tired. He was alive. He walked back to the mirror, and for the first time, he didn't see a performer trying to hold everything together. He saw someone who had finally broken free of himself. The next morning, he woke up with a strange feeling. Not fear. Not worry. Something else. Freedom. And that freedom changed everything he touched afterward. His next rehearsals felt different. There was a fire in his movement, a depth in his expression, a looseness in his rhythm that wasn't weakness, but honesty. People noticed. His choreographers noticed. His colleagues noticed too, even if they didn't say it out loud. It wasn't a sudden transformation. It was a shift, subtle but undeniable. He wasn't trying to impress anymore. He was trying to express. And that made him dangerous, in the best way. When filming resumed for his next project, directors saw something new in him. The way he looked at the camera wasn't the same. The way he stepped into a scene carried more weight. He wasn't performing emotions. He was feeling them. One director even paused the scene and looked at him carefully. "What did you tap into?" he asked quietly. Yibo didn't answer. He didn't need to. Later, during a motorcycle practice session, the same shift showed itself. His movements were cleaner, sharper, but also more instinctive, like he wasn't just controlling the machine but harmonizing with it. He rode not to prove his skill, but to feel the freedom he had unlocked. As weeks passed, that night in the training room became something he didn't talk about. But it existed in the background, guiding him quietly. He stopped second-guessing himself, stopped holding back his ideas, stopped worrying about whether he was too quiet or too serious. He didn't need to change who he was. He only needed to stop limiting himself. And the world began to notice. Interviews felt more natural. His laugh became freer. His eyes carried more life. His performances stopped looking like hard work and started looking like pure instinct. People online said he seemed different. Some said he seemed stronger. Some said he seemed more confident. Some said he seemed more real. But none of them knew the truth. Wang Yibo had gone into a room one night and broken through something no one else could see, something inside himself. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It wasn't a headline. It was a private victory, a personal revolution, a moment only he will ever fully understand. But fans could feel it. The industry could sense it. The world eventually saw it. Because when an artist breaks their own limits, the entire world feels the impact. And whether he admits it or not, that night in the practice room became one of the quiet turning points of Wang Yibo's life. Not because he became better, but because he became real. And real is always stronger than perfect. He didn't expect the next phase of his journey to begin with exhaustion. Not physical exhaustion that was familiar, but a deeper kind of fatigue that comes when life moves faster than your mind can process. His career was climbing. Opportunities were forming. Yet even in the middle of growth, there was a sense of unfinished business inside him. A quiet voice reminding him that the only limits left were the ones he hadn't confronted yet. This became clear during a particularly demanding preparation period for a new performance. It wasn't like the regular training he was used to. This one required a blend of intense choreography, emotional storytelling, and sharp physical precision. It was the kind of project that could make an audience feel something unforgettable if he could push past his own boundaries. The rehearsals stretched late into the night. The mirrors in the studio reflected every angle of his effort, the sharp movements, the controlled breathing, the determination in his eyes. Sweat rolled down his neck as he repeated the routine again and again, refusing to settle for anything less than mastery. Others in the room were impressed. They whispered quietly, acknowledging his dedication. But Yibo wasn't dancing for praise. He wasn't dancing for approval. He was dancing to reach a version of himself he hadn't met yet. A version buried beneath discipline, experience, and instinct. A version that needed to break free. One evening, after hours of repetition, the choreographer called for a break. The team stepped aside, but Yibo remained exactly where he was, staring at his reflection as if he were studying someone he hadn't fully understood. His expression was calm, but something was shifting behind his eyes, a hunger to push further, deeper, higher. He ran the choreography again.
And again.
And again. Each time, the movements looked sharper, but something was still missing. Something internal. Something emotional. Something that couldn't be taught by steps or timing. That was when the choreographer approached him quietly. "You're performing it correctly," he said, "but you're not living it yet." Yibo looked up. He understood immediately. Perfect execution wasn't the goal. Perfect expression was. The choreographer continued, "This piece isn't about skill. It's about breaking something inside yourself, a barrier, a memory, a fear. Once you break it, your movement will change. And everyone watching will feel the difference." Yibo didn't respond, but those words settled into his mind like a seed waiting for the right moment to grow. After the team left for the night, he stayed behind again. The studio lights felt softer, the room quieter, the shadows longer. He stood in the middle of the floor, closed his eyes, and allowed memories to rise. Not the comfortable ones, the difficult ones. Times when he doubted himself. Times when he was misunderstood. Times when pressure felt heavier than talent. Times when he felt alone despite being surrounded by people. It wasn't sadness he felt, it was truth. He opened his eyes, took a breath, and began to dance again. But this time something shifted. The movements weren't just steps. They were confessions. Release. Transformation. Every spin, every hit, every pause carried emotion he had never allowed himself to express physically before. The music ended. He stood still, chest rising and falling, sweat dripping steadily down his jaw. For the first time, he felt something break, not in a painful way, but in a liberating way. A mental limit he had unknowingly built through years of discipline and perfection. And in that silent studio, he realized that this was the moment the performance finally became his. The next day during rehearsal, the entire room noticed the change immediately. His energy wasn't louder, it was deeper. The choreography looked the same, but it felt different. More alive. More personal. More powerful. The kind of performance that doesn't just catch eyes, it captures hearts. The choreographer watched silently, his expression slowly shifting into a smile. "There it is," he whispered. Word spread quickly through the team. Dancers exchanged looks. Assistants whispered to each other. Even those who had seen him at his highest levels knew something remarkable had happened overnight. This wasn't just improvement, it was evolution. When the final performance day arrived, the anticipation backstage felt electric. The hall buzzed with energy. Crew members rushed around preparing lights and sound. The audience filled the seats with excitement. But in the middle of all the noise, Yibo centered himself in calm silence. He stood behind the stage curtain, breathing steadily, letting the world slow down around him. His heart wasn't racing. His hands weren't shaking. There was no fear, only purpose. The purpose that comes when someone knows they are about to deliver the best version of themselves. The lights dimmed. The music began. And when he stepped onto the stage, the shift was immediate. Every movement hit with precision, strength, and emotion. The audience could feel the intensity before they even understood it. It wasn't just a dance. It was an experience. There was a moment, midway through the performance, when the crowd audibly reacted. A small gasp. A wave of awe. It was the exact moment his breakthrough became visible to everyone watching. The exact second his evolution became undeniable. By the end of the piece, the room erupted into applause. Not polite applause. Not routine applause. But explosive, emotional applause. The kind that fills the air with warmth and admiration. The kind that only happens when an artist shares a piece of their inner world. When he walked off stage, he didn't smile immediately. He just breathed, a long, grounding breath. He wasn't proud because people clapped. He was proud because he knew he had broken a limit he once believed was fixed. And in that breath, he realized something deeper. Limits don't disappear when you challenge them. They disappear when you become someone who no longer needs them. From that day forward, every performance he gave carried that new layer. Depth shaped by honesty, movement shaped by emotion, and presence shaped by the courage to break internal walls. People often praise Wang Yibo for his skills, discipline, and talent. But one of the most powerful stories behind his artistry is the night he stood alone in a studio, confronted himself, and expanded beyond the version he thought was his peak. What changed him wasn't pressure. It wasn't opportunity. It wasn't fame. It was the moment he decided to stop meeting expectations and start exceeding his own.